you. Our next speaker is Professor Tabbetha Dobbins from the University of, from Rowan University. And this session, there are actually going to be actually four presenters. And you see they'll be going back and forth. And this is about the African Light Source Conceptual Design Report. So Tabbetha did her bachelor's in physics from Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. And she did her master's degree in material science, also in Pennsylvania. And she did her PhD at Penn State. And she's currently professor of physics and astronomy at Rowan University, and also vice president of research at Rowan University. So Tabbetha.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Foje, for introducing us and for the time to talk about the African Light Source Conceptual Design Report. And I want to introduce my co-presenter, Dr. Dorian Bowler, as well as Dr. Christine Dervais will be presenting later on in this talk, and Dr. Riccardo Bortolini for his useful inputs to this talk. We see the conceptual design report of the African Light Source as a sort of a starting point to begin to discuss with ministers of science, with presidents, with leaderships in the continent of Africa about this project, so that they can really have a good concept of whether they can position it in their country. And so we really think that this is a very integral part of the entire process. And I would like to walk you through a few steps of what we have done so far in getting to a conceptual design report. So I don't have to tell anyone on this call that we are really working on a significant project in terms of cost of about $1 billion. And as you know, the major question we get as we go and present and inform people, scientists and others about this project, is they immediately want to know where in Africa. And we always give the response that we don't have a location, but instead we are working towards a vision, so that some country will decide to position it there in their home country. And we see this as a coalition effort. These light sources are quite expensive, and so we see it as a coalition of countries. The other thing I want to emphasize with this image, this True Size of Africa image, is that the distances are not represented on our typical global maps that a researcher would have to travel even within the continent of Africa to reach to the light source. So you can see the true scale shows you that even one light source is going to still have quite a significant travel distance to reach that light source. So we speculate that within 20 years we will have this light source, and the how it will occur, and from 20 years, not from now, but from when we began the concerted effort, which I would say was earlier than maybe 2014, earlier than that. A little bit earlier than that. It's hard to pinpoint. Finally, the how deals with what we lay out within this conceptual design report, and that's why we see this activity as so significant. Now, the one thing that will be different about the African Light Source Conceptual Design Report is that we are putting more emphasis into describing the socioeconomic benefits than you would see as a conceptual design report out of say an upgrade to the advanced photon source, or an upgrade to any of the other light sources around the globe. And the reason that we want to position this here is because we see this the African Light Source as a major contributor to boosting scientific research, boosting capacity building, preventing the brain drain, as you heard in earlier presentation by Dr. Diallo. This is very important, a very important tool to be positioned on the African continent, and we want our conceptual design report to effectively communicate that. I'll let you read for yourself the other reasons, and I want to say that we also view and within the scope of the conceptual design report, as you'll see later, we view the importance of the technical infrastructure, the additional facilities, industries, and companies that will accompany this light source, companies that will support technology solutions, but also companies that will support just the visit and the hotel and restaurant industry around this light source. So there will be a section commenting on and discussing those types of options. And we've seen this happen in Brazil near the Brazilian light source. We've also seen this happen in New York, in Ithaca, New York, around the Cornell University light source called CHESS, and that this infrastructure of companies that are able to thrive because of the existence of those light sources. We can look at this slide, and I took this from the Department of Energy, Brookhaven National Lab. We can look at this as I use it as an inference. It's not an exact causal relationship, but we can see on the left, on our y-axis on the small diagram on the left, we're looking at the brightness and brilliance of the light source, how much intensity, how many photons per square millimeters per second are able to be generated by those light sources. And we can see over the years that those numbers have increased, and we've gone to more brilliant light sources of the third generation. We do anticipate our light source, as you'll hear in Dorian Bowler's presentation, we do anticipate our light source to be a fourth generation light source. But the inference I like to make is that's shown here is the side-by-side analogous increase in synchrotron publications coming out in high impact factor journals and other journals of synchrotron and free electron laser science. And what we see is that this, the inference here is that the intensity of the light is actually driving the science. In the next slide, I just want to show you another view, and this is number of science papers published. This is a worldmapper.org. It's a website that will allow you to choose any factors. You can choose number of Nobel Prizes in a given year. You can choose, in this case, I chose number of science papers published. You're limited to your choices. 2016, I think, was the last update. But what the software does is it then rearranges the globe so that the size of the country and continent, in this case, depends on the number of science papers published. And you can see that with the growth of a light source, if it indicates that we're going to grow in the number of publications, then it also indicates that that we will grow in our influence in something like a data metric such as represented here on the world mapper. So about our CDR, just to give a historical perspective, we like to think that it started in November 2015 with the Grenoble resolutions at the first African Light Source workshop that was held at the ESRF. And I have an image of those resolutions there. You can also find this information on our website. In January 29, Dr. Ernie Molyneux presented a CDR white paper concept, and we ran with that concept from there, and knowing that we would have to pull together a committee and a more concerted effort. And so by November of 2019, we had our first meeting of the conceptual design report team. It was approximately 10 members, and we proceeded with our work, and so now and we've also proceeded with a growth, and now today we have about 20 members, inclusive of 2 student members. They may be recent graduates, but they started with our committee as student members, and we're planning for a full CDR to be completed, hopefully by the November 2021 meeting in Kigali. So just to introduce to you who is serving on this, we have a wide range of people serving on it in terms of their career, where they are in their career. As I said, that we have students as well as we have more senior personnel. We have a diverse group in terms of geographic location serving on this committee. And we convene our meetings roughly once a month to continue to work towards this conceptual design report, inclusive of fundraising activities, and inclusive of, as you'll hear by the last slide, inclusive of efforts to bring additional voices in on the discussion as it makes sense. And so here you have the URL, the website where you can read about the conceptual design report a little bit more. And so next slide. So right now we have 4 volumes envisioned. We have a 5th volume in planning, but right now we have 4 volumes fleshed out in detail. The first volume will cover political, economic, development, and management concepts. The second volume you'll hear in detail by Dr. Bowler, machine design concepts. Then we go into what will be at the beamlines, and that's volume 3 with our scientific case and technical abilities. And then the volume 4 is our integrated site design and construction. We need to consider, we need to provide the governments that may be considering positioning source in their country, to provide them with some information about what would be necessary for the site. That's one of the earliest questions they will ask. Now, just to show you guys a breakout of the various volumes, the first volume has 6 chapters. You can read them there. The second volume then has 4 chapters. And again, this may grow in terms of the volume 3 having only 1 chapter. We may see that the need to break that out into more chapters. And then volume 4, the integrated site design, you can see that we have the details kind of in mind, inclusive of the computational infrastructure that might be needed at the time that this light source would be built. And we always have to remember that we are working on a time scale where what is going to be necessary computational wise in the future may not be what would be necessary today, and we're keeping that in mind as well. Now, to introduce to you guys Dr. Bowler, who will go through the volume 2, the what you see as a typical conceptual design report is the machine design. So I will pass to Dr. Bowler, and we'll change the slides as he suggests, or unless he would like to share slides.
No, you can continue to drive. And just a correction, it's just Mr. Bowler. I don't want
Okay, my apologies.
myself here, but I am very happy to speak to you today to just give a quick update on volume 2. I believe there's been quite a bit of activity. So over the past few months, we have been reviewing and building a catalog of design reports. We have a white paper that we're currently drafting that'll really kind of follow most of the key points of this talk. We've been recruiting others to join the effort. And, you know, this group, Christine, Ricardo, and myself, we're really committed to organizing and contributing to the drafting of the document. So I wanted to just mention, in order for us to move forward, there are a few things that we need in terms of feedback from the community and from the committee. And that's to establish the key parameters towards the light source that is actually designed. And so the first important key parameter is the brilliance or brightness, so to speak, which is just a crucial indicator of the overall machine performance. It relates the number of photons produced, the angular divergence, the cross-sectional area of the X-ray beam, as well as the bandwidth. Another key metric is the admittance of the electron beam, which essentially characterizes the area occupied by the beam. And in each plane, it's simply the beam size times the divergence. And so the key point here is that higher brightness photon beams are generated by small emittance electron beams. And so the smaller the emittance, the higher the technological challenge. And so the more, the more difficult, it is to design your magnetics and your injection and stability systems, et cetera. And so we'd also like some feedback on the photon energy range, perhaps the number of beam lines, and even the total budget, which we'll get to. Could you go to the next slide?
Yes.
So many of these points have already been mentioned, but I wanted to go back to the socioeconomic case that Tabbetha mentioned, just to underscore a couple points. And so it's first that when we talk about tackling diseases endemic to Africa, crystallography is no doubt one of the greatest tools that we could use to determine structures, especially, the structures that are medicinal targets that are being used worldwide. Now, if we compare the larger beam sizes at third generation sources to the now submicron beam sizes at the state of the art or fourth generation light sources, the key point here is that the higher flux at the fourth generation sources give us greater efficiency and ability to determine structures. And that's going to go a long way towards providing Africa with the most powerful tools to, fight some of its most infectious diseases. On the right, what I'm showing here, we've mentioned COVID a few times. There is a lot of research going on at light sources around the world that are developing drugs, engineering antibodies, and even studying the effectiveness of PPE. What you see at the top right is a tomographical image from the ESRF in France, which is a fourth generation source, which provides outstanding soft tissue imaging. And on the bottom, you see brain tissue being imaged. And both of these are at resolutions on the scale of 6 microns. Next slide, please. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention in reference to fourth generation light sources is the advances in spatial resolution. And so that's really going to push the envelope of each one of these areas. If we're talking about energy research or mineral extraction or even human origins, it's really going to drive what we can do with the machine. And so I give two examples. One, a 13-million-year-old fossil that was discovered in Kenya, but imaged at the ESRF. And the images were so high quality that we were able to determine many details about the brain cavity, the inner ears, the teeth, and the age of the fossil. And that gives us a lot more clues about the early connections between humans and primates, et cetera, which is really exciting for that community. And I think these studies should be able to be done in Africa. On the right, I'm showing an image of the Swiss light source. And this, an image generated at the Swiss light source that's showing a fully imaged chip down to the 10 nanometer scale. And the technique that was used here is actually the only non-destructive method to image integrated circuits. And as you see in the literature, this has many applications in both security and failure analysis. Next slide, please. So now that we talked about, state-of-the-art machines, I thought that it'd be useful to just show you a survey of about 30 synchrotron light sources worldwide. And in this plot, you're looking at the emittance, which is normalized by the beam energy on the left scale, and then the circumference on the right. And the essential relation here is that emittance scales with the number of dipoles in the lattice. So the key trend here is that facilities that focus on or that employ double bend achromat technology are now trending in a factor of about 100 reduction in emittance to the red line, which is based on multi-bend achromat technology. And there's even a further reduction in emittance at facilities that are employing technologies like on-axis injection. So I want to give two examples here. In terms of an existence proof, is Max 4, which you see directly in this center of the circle that I've drawn, as well. And Max 4 was actually built from scratch. The other example is like the ESRF, which I've mentioned a couple of times before. And I just want to mention that these are real facilities that are operating right now. And these aren't paper designs. They've already solved many of the technological challenges. So my takeaway is that, Africa is essentially ready to build a fourth generation light source at the state of the art that would operate and improve over the next 20 years. This graph also shows that facilities don't typically end up where they start. And so what I mean by that is, you know, the ESRF on the blue line, you see that there's a ESRF2. You see Diamond on the blue line, Diamond 2. And so these facilities are expected to, you know, operate and receive upgrades. And in my opinion, I think you see a hotspot that I've drawn here in the middle of the plot that would indicate a machine about, 500 meters in circumference at around 3 GeV energy would actually be a great tool to support world-class research in Africa. Next slide, please. So I hesitantly talk about cost because there's a lot of study that actually needs to go in, but I think it's very important to mention that all I'm trying to convey on this slide is the relative magnitudes of the projects. There are many assumptions. And so in each one of these cases, we are not comparing apples to apples. But to use Max 4 at a cost of 750 million, as an example, approximately maybe 250 million of that is beam lines. There is another big portion of the cost to develop and build 20 or so buildings on site. And then there's another chunk of that goes towards the 14 out of the 21 beam lines that will be constructed. Now, if we look at the bottom of the box on the left, you'll see Diamond at a much lesser cost. And the main driver there is that Diamond is able to use, existing infrastructure. So they didn't have, the same cost in developing the site. Just above it is, I'm showing about 300 million for a light source in Thailand, the second there. And they budget about 60 million towards the accelerator, 30 million towards the storage ring, 30 million for beam lines, and so on. So I just wanted to give some sort of flavor for the scale that these projects can have. A quick point that I want to stop and earmark is I don't really think the risk on developing a facility like this is on the design. There are mature tools that are being used worldwide that make these facilities really successful upon construction. So we have particle tracking codes, where we can optimize the beam lattices, and there's 3D mechanical design software, and there's an international community of experts. And it's a really collaborative nature once you look at how many of the labs have been developed and constructed. The opportunity that I see for Africa is actually one of expanding its industrial capacity to support the R&D. And so that's where, you could throw any number out, but I just say, it could easily be a $250 million investment to do things like, develop facilities that would support high standard machining. And so when I talk about that, I mean, computer numerical controlled machining, CNC, that allows you to machine to, micron precision, which is required, vacuum, vessels and magnets and things like that. But I think that the opportunity is so great because there is going to be a vast expansion and, expertise in many fields. This is going to lead, as Tabbetha mentioned, to an extreme improvement in terms of local infrastructure. So if we talk about power, computing, travel, and many of the other, corollary things that are associated with a light source like this. But most importantly, I see it as a true opportunity to usher in the next technological workforce in Africa. So the technicians, scientists, and engineers, will all have the opportunity to be trained. The key part of the CDR is to make sure that all of these opportunities, that there's a strategy to actually realize the opportunity so that there's a true transfer of, resources and expertise to African citizens. Next slide. So I'm just going to briefly mention a few of the components related to synchrotrons. So there are many variations on design, and so this schematic is simply showing that, you know, there's the source is typically an electron gun, and the electron bunches are accelerated in a linear accelerator into a booster ring, where the electrons are accelerated up to the same, typically accelerated up to the same energy as the storage ring. Now, once in the storage ring, the beam is maintained on a closed path by the bin achromats. And as you see, there are different bin akhromat technologies which determine the overall performance of the machine. And then there are also insertion devices like, wigglers and undulators, which are the means where the highest brightness X-rays are sent to the experimental hutches for experiments. Next. So I'll stop quickly here just to talk about injection technologies. I'm showing an old rendering of Max 4 on the left. And I just wanted to point out that several light sources worldwide plan to use a LINAC as a basis for future free electron lasers. So this is a LINAC that's fully capable of supporting a free electron laser, just to distinguish from the previous slide. And FELs are interesting because they actually offer a peak brightness of about 1 million times higher than the 4th generation light sources. And so having a clear path to the next upgrade built, from day one on a particular project is a very, it's happening at a lot of other facilities worldwide. I'll just say that. Now, the drawback or the reason you wouldn't start with the FEL is because its lack of capacity to support users. It's brighter, but LCLS, where I work, we can only serve 1 or 2 user groups at one time. So I think it really makes sense that, we keep the conversation on synchrotrons. On the right, what I'm showing is a photo of a schematic of the Swiss light source. And what I want to point out here is that you see the booster ring is actually in the same tunnel as the storage ring. And so this, the way this operates in many light sources follow this design practice. It's called top-up mode, and that's where the booster ring accelerates the electrons to the same energy as the storage ring, and then it's, the energy that's lost is just topped up, so to speak, in small injections. There is another novel technique that's termed on-axis injection, and that has the benefit that you provide even smaller betatron oscillations. And so the only takeaway there is you get even improved admittance, if you remember the original plot I showed. Thanks. Next. So I won't be able to give a lot of detail here, but I just want to underscore there is a lot of expertise worldwide that could contribute to the design of a 4th generation light source. And so one of the key considerations in a CDR, or one of the starting points, is to determine what your complement of bin magnets, quadrupoles, and sextupoles, your bin achromat, so to speak, how that's going to impact the overall electron beam profile, which is ultimately going to determine the admittance. And so those are one of the first calculations or analysis that would need to be done. Overall, I'd say that the magnet technology is extremely just crucial, really because of the tight tolerances that are required for all of the high precision devices on the beam line. Next slide. So the story, or the takeaway here, is to achieve the high brightness that we're talking about. And as you see, the diffraction limited storage rings are the 4th generation light sources I've been referring to. So to achieve the high brightness within an adequate photon energy range, which we need to determine what that energy range is, we require a cleaner spectrum. And so what I'm showing here is just comparing the spectrum you see in a 3rd generation set of undulators versus 4th generation. You see a much cleaner spectrum, which is going to give you capability to improve imaging and experiments across the board. It's too many to name at this point, but in order to proceed, we need to determine and need to get some feedback on the photon energy range, the brilliance, the emittance, perhaps even the number of beam lines or target budget from the committee, because we're really ready to move forward. We are preparing a white paper, as I mentioned, that we'll publish pretty soon, which will give a few more details. Next. One more click. Christine, would you like me to, or would?
So I can, if you want, so finish on this slides. You want, or?
No, I'll let you go. I'll introduce
Christine.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So last but not least, so what's the future in terms of activities? So what we have gathered there in this last slide, so this is maybe not only for the CDR itself, so which was the topic of this presentation, but I think a bit beyond. So the next step, because everything is, as well as you have seen, to be proactive. So because it has been already over the years, quite a lot of plan and possibility as well to gather information to build on those best practice, I would say. So in the beginning of next year, so we have thought to start with some topical webinar. So there is some workshop that could look at the different aspects of the project. So this is one of the important parts, so to gather with different teams, so the different expert, and try to build up, so through some white papers, some possibility later on to combine everything in this CDR, which is essential in order to be able to show what this light source can do, and to look at on over the time, over the 20 years, how everything will be done. So to be able to do that, of course, we will need to better understand and have a better survey of what exists. And this is why with the different light source that exist around the world, so it will be very important to merge as well with their knowledge and their capacity, and to transfer those technology as well, just like their own knowledge. So to try to understand what already exists and to try to see what the African community really needs. So this is one of the important aspects. So we saw already from the previous scientific case that there's a lot of capacity that can be built from this light source and this research infrastructure implementation. So now to look at, after a better definition of what the scope would be, so this is to look at the cost and then the schedule. So this is why we need really to spend a bit more time, or to spend a lot of time, I would say, to better establish the different activities with this breakdown structure, so working breakdown structure, to define the different tasks, assign people, assign costs. And then from this, we would really have a better credibility in terms as well of following up, so a process and being able to support the current roadmap that has been shown previously. And so one of the things that is very important as well, because we've seen that over the 20 years, so there will be the need of having a lot of different diversity of people. And one of the aspects of that is the training, the teaching. So for instance, so here the community to be trained will be, so the scientists, but as well the engineers and the politicians, certainly a lot of different aspects. So here I put a link for a MOOC, so this massive open online course. So with the modern technology now, we have really access to a lot of knowledge, and this NPAP, so Nordic Particle Accelerator project, has been run so since with a grant that has been received from the European so the European Commission, from the strategic partnership. So since 2015, based on some school, we have then developed this massive open online course, 3 of them mainly that could help to build up so the next and the African light source. So you have as well in the website of the African light source the link for this resource and the way to train so the coming scientists to use all of that. So how to define a light source, looking at the historical, and then build up from those knowledge to try to see what you need. So like Dorian was mentioning, so the different components, what they're used for, and how can we get the best possibility as well to have not a new, maybe state-of-the-art machine, but something that will be really effective and that we could build. And then the last MOOC so is more on the possibility for the medical application, and something that for the community could be also of interest. But teaching training is something which is really of main importance in all this prospect. So this is why we have as well with the African School of Fundamental Physics and Application, so also introduced by so Ketavi that gave a presentation earlier, and I've been as well part of the team and the main organizer since 2010. So we have a lot of effort with now an additional effort by having some online courses. So in addition to teaching to students, in addition to trying to have as well with so the forum, the possibility to communicate with policymakers, what would be the different aspects of a light source. And then I can mention there, and I've seen as well that we have also Professor Wage with the possibility to implement the idea of the need for this light source. So that's something that we have also developed during one of our forums, so in Senegal in 2014. So that was a really interesting as well milestone at that time. And then we have, so now, as mentioned, so teaching teacher, teaching student, and then mentoring the different students and alumni that we had, but to adapt each time from the topic. One of the important things is for this aspect of the light source, the possibility to learn more in terms of how to build those light sources. And then we have, so the next lecture series that will be given by Professor Andrew Harrison, and that will be as well the possibility with 6 courses to understand more what the light source can be, and to have a full panel of different discussion as well that we will have at the end of the course. So, and then the important thing and the important aspect, as it was so underlined and with the previous presentation, and I completely resonate with that, with the possibility really to grow this ecosystem in an harmonious way. So by really looking at the training, like the possibility to have the actor of this light source in every discipline, but as well with the industry. So we need really to make sure that in Africa, the industry will be strong enough to be able to support all those different developments. And then to have, of course, so with this research infrastructure, then the possibility to drive and to get the local community involved. And this is this word, so the concept of Ubuntu that I have to admit I really liked. I've discovered it in 2010, and this is really by, so because we are, so it can be that this light source can become a reality. So the future activity are also related in the possibility to be actor, and then having as well, so the possibility to contribute to this project, which I think is an important step forward. So that's the main message I think that we can take from that, if there are any questions, and then we will be more than happy to be like, and to engage the community. I think that, like Uncle Sam said, so we need you.
Would you introduce yourself, Christine? We missed your introduction. If you could say where you are. And
introduction, yeah, so in a nutshell, so I've been so working at CERN and at Fermilab, so over the last 20 years, so building different equipment for accelerator, but as well being on the side doing a lot of activities that are related to enhancing the different possibility to transfer knowledge, so through some different schools. So like, for instance, this Nordic Particle Accelerator School, or the African School of Fundamental Physics and Application. And so working mainly on cold LINAC, and this is what is maybe not needed in Africa, but still we need to find ways to accelerate charged particles as well. So that's
thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that was a really interesting presentation by our speakers there. So there are 1 or 2 questions I saw in the talk. There was, I think Nabil was asking about building materials, like sustainable building materials that are being developed in Morocco. So what, if anyone has thought about using those?
I will comment on that. At this point, so this is something that is very interesting to us. You notice in our volumes, volume 4 is the construction section. And at this point, we are just trying to accumulate volunteers who will be working on that section. And so we welcome any additional input, anyone else who would like to contribute. I hope this comment is in the chat so that we can hold it and have the information of the details that you just asked in the question.
Okay.
Likewise, I saw the question related to whether all African countries are already included in the project. As you saw, this is only one subcommittee, the conceptual design report team. We doubled in size in this 1 year, and we have much more capacity as the first bullet point on the Christine slide showed that I will go back to that slide, that we will be holding a series of panels, and I think this virtual format has really helped us out a lot, that we can now start meeting under subtopical groups, even within the CDR. So we will be reaching out to the broad community to begin meetings. Our initial meeting will describe how these topical groups will work. We already have leaders for each of these topical groups, and you can think of the topical groups as maintaining one of the chapters that you saw earlier in the slides. And so we have leaders who will be convening, put out broad agency calls, and so you will be able to see where you can join a topical group. And our intention is to have every country represented within the project, and the interests of every country represented in the project.
Okay, so we have another question from Ian Swenson. Have other synchrotron projects shared project management plans, including timelines for planning?
Yeah, I can comment on that one, and then I believe Christine could probably give more context to WVS directly. But for the data that I actually showed, I used the International Particle Accelerator Conference survey. So every year they have a publication where they give an overview of all of the active projects in particle and accelerator physics, and it actually includes, you know, high-level budgets, timelines, contacts to project leaders with emails. And so I would envision that one of our next steps on this piece will be to reach out to those directly.
Exactly. So this is exactly the step, to use what we already know and to try to have the order of magnitude that would be in compliance as well with the needs that might be a bit different in Africa. So certainly looking at the contingency, maybe it will be different, because in the context of Africa, there is a lot of industry maybe that are missing, or dynamism that would not be the same. But we will definitively have to look and study all those different cases first.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the fact that a lot of people are still here, even though we went a little bit over, just demonstrates how interesting the talks were. And please join me in thanking the speakers for the session.